Hi everyone, I'm Terrell, no pronouns, coming to you from Baltimore City in Maryland. Um, uh, and I just want to begin with so the previous slide, King is says something very, very profound here. The prescription for the cure rests with the accurate diagnosis of the disease. Basically, in order to address a problem, we have to know where that problem comes from, what is its symptoms, and what absolutely must be done, and who must do the doing to actually address the problem. And so, as a lot of us, have come to understand, poverty is the problem that we're trying to address in this moment and that King is talking about. And in order to do that, we have to understand poverty comes from a system, and that it takes, uniting the poor. Could we move to the next slide? Uh, and we there's a organization campaign called the Poor People's Campaign, which speaks of the 140 million poor and dispossessed people in the United States. And so this slide helps us to understand, what that 140 million actually look like. We often get a lot of narratives from outside of us that says, there's a black face of poor, or brown or Asian or Latinx. But the truth of the matter is, majority of the people, the poor, are actually white. Now, that does not change the fact that Latinx, Black, Indigenous, and Asian have significantly high percentages of poor um, and low income people, but only by understanding, how this actually looks, can we actually begin to unite across all those lines of division and bring us into a fundamental understanding that we have to work together in order to end poverty. Because that's what we are at the end of the day. We are poverty abolitionists. We want to end it for everyone, everywhere. Next slide. So, yes, why are so many of us poor or near poor? Why are so many of us ashamed to be poor? Most of us were born into the circumstances that we struggle with and try to overcome on a daily basis, and yet there is a sense of shame and uh, our own personal failings that we are taught and retaught over and over again from the media, and just the ways in which we have been, taught to think about these issues, not understanding that we're talking about something far bigger than one single person. Next slide. And so this slide, just kind of highlights a little bit of like what we've, come to understand through study, and like just looking at the way in which our issues, are talked about or not talked about. Like this slide is saying, very little coverage of poverty in the midst of an election season. You're talking about how you're going to represent the issues that's going on, yet the major issue of our time gets no airtime. Next slide. And so, as like to go back to King really quickly, like King helps us to understand and develop our theory of change. That which is, what is the problem and what is needed to actually address it. And we know that in order to create the change that we need to see, a radical transformation of society, it has to begin from the bottom up. It can never start at the top. It can never start at the middle. It must always begin at the bottom, because the folks at the bottom have the least to gain from keeping this system the way it is, and so much more to get if we actually change it. And the truth is, when the poor shift, everybody else shifts. That's just that's the way in which change has to happen. That's the way change always happens. And so we know that in order to address poverty, we have to unite our class around the major issues that we are seeing, and develop leaders who are clear, connected, committed, and competent, who are then okay, the slides just started jumping. Sorry. Who are connected and united in that through human rights struggle, and the understanding that we must end poverty for everyone everywhere. Next slide. And so at this moment, I'm going to turn it over to Father Ty.
Thanks, Terrell. And again, I guess I'll say greetings from Maryland, just slightly outside of Baltimore City, in a place called Middle River. We're going to look at so just building on what just Terrell shared with us, starting with that. Think back to again the King quote. This is going to be now looking at the accurate diagnosis, and rooted in our theory of change. I mean, that theory of change is really important. We understand this. And so that theory of change emerges out of this accurate understanding of what we're up against and these theories of poverty or impoverishment. And we're going to look at 5 theories of poverty today. First, poverty as accident, poverty as pathology, poverty as justified by scripture or the Bible, poverty as a technical problem, and then finally, poverty as structure. If you have any ideas, you want to throw them in the chat about any of these, just bring. You can fill the chat with examples or ideas, and we're going to unpack those now. So the next slide. So first, poverty as accident, and I just want to say this slide also has a graphic. The graphic, it's kind of small to read, but it's legislation enacted to combat the coronavirus pandemic, and it includes $5.3 billion of COVID-19 relief that came from our federal government. So think about that. Poverty as accident is the theory that's often says poverty is just temporary. Sometimes it's a market correction that needs to happen. It's totally unforeseen or unforeseeable, like a natural disaster. That's how poverty happens. And so therefore, the ruling class presents so-called solutions to this theory of poverty, like short-term assistance. And I think, if we think back, we all have a memory of many memories of COVID-19, and we can remember, so when that happened, we saw the largest expansion of Medicaid in 2020 ever during the pandemic. And then that was taken away during the Great Medicaid Purge under President Biden, a Democrat, in 2023, which led to 25 million people losing their health care. So again, that's what happens with the ruling class's theory that poverty is an accident. Whereas for us, we know it's not just an accident, and that the expansion of Medicaid to all is the real solution. We'll talk about that more later, but I'll pass now to Terrell to talk about some other theories of poverty.
Thank you, Father Ty. Yes, poverty as pathology, and we get this a lot when we hear, the people just don't work hard enough. Anyone who's known someone that's struggling around their food, their health care, whatever, they work very hard. We have a society that doesn't necessarily count all of that work, but that doesn't mean that they're not expending energy around these things. And so, really, what poverty is pathology, that is, that is a cultural behaviors, it's attitudes, it's values that they just weren't raised to, understand the value of a hard day's work. And so we often get these ideas as solutions that we got to educate or, just simply say, well, these people just can't be helped. They just have wrong thinking, so they can't be helped. So the welfare system and like things that remove at the agency of people to act in their own best interests usually become the solutions that we get out of poverty as pathology. Next slide. And so, like what I was just saying, this kind of actually helps to illustrate that just a little bit. Poor people, one, believe selfishness is a vice, while rich people believe selfishness is a virtue. Rich people are just bad people. Poor people are just don't understand the value of a dollar. So of course they'll spend it on Netflix rather than investing it. All the little things that just thoughts that just kind of pervade our media and like the ways in which like we're presented to one another and around the world. Next slide. And so another is poverty as justified by scripture. Essentially, we often get this idea that, all we have to do is like the suffering in this life will make us worthy of heaven and getting will be rewarded in the end. So we just have to show, more faith in God, not necessarily question the things that we see, but to be good Christians specifically, we gotta fling a coin to a person in need, uh, donate clothes, but it doesn't speak to the idea that it's something larger that's going on here. It makes it really about a the someone who's doing better giving to someone who's not. Um, and of course that just the ways in which scripture is often, weaponized. Like the poor will always be with you, and wealth is blessed by God. So the ways in which it's used is understandable. Next slide. And before I turn it back over to Father Ty, poverty as a technical problem. We often get this that you'll hear this from politicians all the time that the system it's just got a few kinks in it, and we're just trying to work those out. It's a beta test. We gotta work out the bugs. So of course, it's not that people are that we have a housing market that's creating homelessness. No, of course not. Not that healthcare is too expensive. We just haven't, added the tweaks that make it work for people. And so it's built around like making the system more efficient and like what we often hear as access to healthcare or access to housing rather than it just being a right that we have. And with that, I'll pass it on to Father Ty for the last one.
Thank you, Terrell. And if we could go to the next slide. And so now we're going to look at poverty as structural. The very fact that our very economy, the way it's designed, the way it operates, the way it's been set up, and the way it's perpetrated produces poverty, not as accident, but as a direct outcome. And I think earlier, Jason Larrabee from Vermont, you volunteered to be a reader. If you can, would you be able to unmute and read this quote?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
All right. Poverty as structural. Our economy produces poverty. The movement must address itself, to the question of restructuring the whole of American society. There are 40 million poor people here, and one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising question about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth, When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalist economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society.
Thank you. And the next slide. Would anyone want to read this slide?
I could do that for you.
Thank you.
We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. And you see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that is 2/3 water? These are the questions that must be asked.
Oh, if you can go back to that slide. Back. There we go. So this was from also both of these quotes. Is one long quote. It had to fit on 2 slides. It's in his last speech to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference staff from MLK, from Martin. Where do we go from here? And King rightly asked these, like, we have to ask these fundamental economic structural questions. And we might even think back to the Mystica and Nizhmi asking these questions, like, who defines affordable housing, and who owns the means to produce housing? Is it the private sector? Is it billions of dollars to build more houses that no one's going to live in, or only the extremely wealthy? So again, we see poverty as structure gets to the heart of what we're going to now share. And again, think back to that theory of change. This is all about a system that continues to produce poverty that needs to be dismantled because we need to kill it before it kills all of us. And so, again, I'll just pass this now to Kristen, who will take these questions much deeper and show us really what we're up against and our solution to overcome it.
Thank you so much, Father Ty. Appreciate you. And Terrell, that was awesome. We are a little bit ahead of time. I just want to ask Joe, our facilitator, do we want to open it up for a couple comments or take anything out of the chat, or do you want me to just jump right in? What do you think?
I'll leave it to you, but I think a couple comments sound great.
Yeah, awesome. This was, these theories of poverty, we started studying them. God, one of my close comrades from way back, Renee, is on here today. I think it's been like 10 to 15 years, and they're really powerful. And I'm going to get into a little bit about different theories of change, ours and theirs. But yeah, what came up for folks? Anyone want to jump off mute, give a comment or two before we get into kind of our theory of change and analysis and how our strategy comes from that?
This is Kelly from Maryland, from United Workers. And, thinking about this presentation so far and how it connects to the NVMA winter study that some of us are taking, and really all the other political education I've taken part in so far with United Workers, I just keep landing on these fundamental issues were baked in from the very beginning. The bottom line that profit making is the be all and end all. Considerations about human rights, about basic decency, about anyone's welfare don't matter. All that matters is profit. And so when I look at any one of these questions King raised or that Nizhmi raised, or it just feels like this goes all the way to the root, and it makes it more vital than ever that we're all root doctors, because this is deeply embedded in our system, in our way.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Anything that came up?
Yeah, I got a comment on it. I agree with everybody what they're saying. it's it's something that's been going on for a long time, but it's definitely controlled. I feel. I definitely feel that. I think COVID was an opportunity to eliminate the weak or whatever, or the poor, or the lower class to become poor, so they have control of. Definitely feel there's a control thing there. Um, I just don't. I can't believe that I work full time and I have to go to a pantry to offset the cost of food, and I have a great state job. There's no reason why people that work all the time should be begging at all. It's very frustrating. And I do everything to my house on my own, like, putting a floor in right now. And, I'm tired. I'm ready for retirement in 7 years. And it shouldn't be easier. There's definitely a problem. There's definitely got to stop. It's got to get better. That's got to.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen, Helen. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there is a problem. We have to study a problem, come up with our analysis of the cause of that problem, and then have a strategy based on that analysis. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but yes, you're getting right to it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for jumping in there.
Thank you.
We have time for, a couple more, honestly. Terrell and Father Ty they were concise and efficient in their comments. So I love when we can open up. So please come off mute. Any of the other presenters want to add anything, or please jump in.
I have a thought. Excuse my voice. Hi, I'm Pippa.
Welcome.
So what I find interesting is that American capitalism has become an extreme. Not that capitalism is great to begin with, but over the generations, especially since the 80s, we've seen an increase in hyper individuality. And now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to see that, like, the past few generations in particular have been deeply indoctrinated into the concept of the individual, which seems to be erasing the collective and making everything worse. And I see it every day now. I'm not sure how much of that is my age versus it getting worse, but it's become deeply problematic, and it makes it very challenging to create collectives that can actually create change. So I just find that, what do other people think about the concept of hyper individuality? And the also capitalism is predicated upon absolute consumption and unending growth. How is that going to work?
That's right.
Can I hop in on that real quick? So
I just want to say thank you for jumping in there. Absolutely, Becca, go for it.
Yeah, rugged individualism is definitely one of the things that are feeding a lot of the fires that are hurting us right now. In any culture prior to this form of capitalism, being an individual kind of meant that you messed up and got kicked out of the collective. When you're part of that collective, you have protection when, like, the wild animals show up. Kind of like the wild animals we have running around right now. These are not threats that we are ever designed to handle by ourselves. Humanity was intended to be a team project, and we all got to be on the same team. So I absolutely agree. That is one of the tools that they use to separate us, and they build this whole mental terrain around the fact that we can't ask for help. We have to do this by ourselves, and if we ask for help, we're weak, we're stupid, we're lazy, crazy, and dumb, all the different things that we hear all the time. And yes, absolutely, I stand with you 100%.
Thank you, Becca. Thank you. To go into the next piece, I just want to frame a little bit. Most of the theories of poverty are not coming from the struggle. They're not rising from the midst of the struggle. They are put out as a narrative that isn't reflective of what we are experiencing as organizers and people most directly affected. So what is it? Where does it come from? Like, what is going on? And one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit, to start this off, how does a system produce poverty? We live in a class society, folks. And with the Industrial Revolution starting out in the 1800s, it slowly became a two-class society. You have one class that must work. We must work to provide, earn, be deemed worthy of our basic necessities in life. And there's another class that controls how these necessities are produced and distributed. And to add to that also, they control the narrative about what's going on in our society most of the time. It's indoctrinated into cartoons when you're a child, all the way up to textbooks when you're in your PhD. And thinking about these two classes, and what we talked about earlier, a theory of change. They're handing us a theory, right? They're handing us their analysis, this class that controls, of what the problem is. And they're handing us their strategy, their answer to it. Taka put in the thread nonprofit industrial complex. Nijmi's video talked to policy change. And you look at our theory of change and you see a very big difference. Our theory of change is that society with these two classes and the control of production and distribution creates wealth in the hands of very, very few. And it's been getting smaller and smaller and smaller as we go through the years and the decades. While, 140 million that are not, the bottom, that are not, being able to survive even a $400 crisis. Those numbers are growing and growing and growing, where we have to earn, where we, society that says you must earn your home, you must earn your food, you must earn all of these things. And our solution to that is our theory of change, which is we have to organize, organize, organize. Not increase nonprofits, not increase criminalization, not increase sweeps, not increase SNAP cuts, not increase Medicaid cuts. It's to organize to get the very power needed so that we can turn this society into something that reflects our interests and our needs, not that of the very, very, very few. If you're looking at our social welfare system, which is their solution, when the Great Crash happened in 1929, there were many solutions on the table. The solution that was put into the structure of our country upheld capital. And that was the Social Security Act, a huge social welfare system, public assistance, so forth. With an incorrect analysis of the problem, any solution that you put into place to solve that problem is doomed to fail. When we first started organizing in the Homeless Union and Welfare Rights and the Coalition in the 80s, we said 60 million people poor in this country and not surviving in this system, and about 6 million, 60 million, and then 6 million to 8 million homeless. We're now up to 140 million, and it's growing every day. Not making it in this system where we have to earn our right to live. And the numbers of those unhoused and housing insecure is bigger than we've ever seen it. Millions and millions and millions, right? Some say 8, some say 12, some say 20. Nijmi talks about more empty houses than every person that needs it in this country. We had a study in Philadelphia back in the early 2000s that found this. Philadelphia had 25 empty homes for everybody that needed it. It is not being solved by this incorrect analysis upheld by these theories of poverty. These theories of poverty are upholding this incorrect analysis. So any solutions created by that incorrect narrative, that incorrect analysis, is going to fail to solve the problems and the ills of society. So this two-class society, right? How did this happen? And we're going to get into, I think you might be on the slide before. There we go. Thank you. No, the one with the numbers and the picture, the next one. So the first is we had two technological revolutions in the past 75 years. The first having this profound impact on work, and the second, which we're still in the early stages of, creating this situation where we can't go back. I want to talk just about number one on this slide, which is pretty huge, which talks about that telecommunication networks, computerization, right? It made it easier to communicate, across geographic areas in the country and across the world. It's very interesting. One of the things that I learned about this connection between policy and narratives, and then also what's going on in the material conditions. As this was happening, industry was going to move south. The North in the United States was very unionized. We're going to move south. Well, we can't move south when it's segregated, because then the building of factories in the South is going to be much more expensive. So it was very interesting to me. Food for thought, things that we should study further, whet your appetite for further study. This connection between the passing of the civil rights and the desegregation and the industry in this country going south, and then it left and went into other countries. And you're seeing the groundwork for this when you have satellites allowing for easier communication between different parts of the world, right? And now this narrative of make America great again. And the blue version, right? Not much different, going back to the New Deal. Remember the New Deal in a time when it was very obvious that this system was not working for the masses. The solution came from those still benefiting from the way society was structured, and the New Deal happened. So they're upholding go back to the New Deal, which made capitalism more humane. And I'm a trained social worker, like, my profession came out of this time to make capitalism more humane. So on one side, it's make capitalism more humane. And on the other side, it's make America great again when capitalism was working for everybody. So it's an interesting narrative that they're still controlling, right? And this is coming out of technological, revolutions that are changing the very relationship out to labor and to earning these. Remember, we have to earn these rights. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Can you go back to that slide for one more second? My apologies. The one thing that I do want to talk about also is with this computerization and production being able to go anywhere in the world, and this very sophisticated level of technology in the production process. You have robots replacing labor, right? So you have labor replacing as opposed to labor enhancing. So people are getting pushed out of the system that they need to be in to get the things they need to live, right? And you also see this growth of we'll get into it in the next slide, this growth of imprisonment. So as we are facing this decrease in jobs that allow us to earn enough to live, there's an increase in wealth in the hands of a few. Thank you so much. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. I remember the first time I saw this slide, I heard some folks that were in the poverty initiative that then became the Cairo Center, and Willie Baptist and others had gone to Scotland. And they were talking to people. Now, remember, these countries are much older than the United States. The United States was built and founded by, stolen and then recreated into, a colony, and then the United States, while industrial societies were evolving. But in Scotland, this is a very old country. They were tracking wealth for a very, very long time, centuries and centuries. And they also noticed this wealth and wages, productivity and compensation were even until the 70s. And then you saw this split where productivity starts to go through the roof while wages start to stagnate. And now we know now start to decrease, right? So you'll notice this gap right? And it starts, again, it was in the 70s. But the same thing that starts to happen at this time is incarceration starts to grow. When workers are being thrown out of production processes and become superfluous, they're not needed, right? So after, if we, I don't want to go too much into, but even after slavery, new rules and new laws were written for all those that were displaced. And that same thing is happening now, becoming fodder, right, for other parts of the system. And we do have an amendment, the 13th Amendment, that says everybody is free from slavery. Like it is illegal to have slavery unless incarcerated. So and again, food for thought, whet your appetite, like studying these things as the material conditions are changing, the means of production, distribution, and earning, right? What's happening in the response to that by, the structure that we're living in. We can go to the next slide that really shows that. Look at this growth, y'all. Look at this growth. We have more incarcerated in this country than any other country. And I do believe there was a statistic at one point that said than any other country combined. And it tracks with economics. If you could put those two slides next to each other, or remember those old Gray's Anatomy books where you had the skeletal system and then the nervous system, and they would kind of build on each other. If we could put these two slides and you would see it at the exact same time as production is starting to be done by those who don't eat, don't need bathroom breaks, don't unionize. Robots don't have to take bathroom breaks. They don't have to go to the beach every year in August, right? They're not fighting for concessions. And what we find and what we're having is this production without consumption, right? Very big thing that's happening, and we're getting pushed out. So we can go to the next slide. This fourth industrial revolution that we're in, this is what, for some people is making like, I can write a term paper and not even write a term paper. I can go to do a presentation to my boss and look really good. I'm just going to put it into Chat GPT or one of these things, and it's going to spit me out a presentation. Some people are like really excited about this. Economically, maybe not. So this fourth technological revolution that we're living in today, characterized by artificial intelligence. So again, we have entire factories. We have cars. We have, they're looking at 18-wheelers. If you don't have these big 18-wheeler trucks, you see them on the 295 in New Jersey all the time that say like Amazon Prime. Without those, products can't get to places. Well, now they're trying to figure out how to drive them without drivers, right? So you're seeing these entire factories, again, with no human beings. We're having production without consumption. And one of the things we did a similar school in October, and one of the things Nijmi talked about is not only do you not need healthcare and do you not need PTO and do you not need sick time, dude, you don't even need lights. You don't need water. You don't need bathrooms. Like it's all run by automation. So this is a fundamental piece of our analysis that puts all the wealth of this production without consumption, this production by robots, into the hands of a very few. What happens to those pushed out? And they will create that, remember we have these two classes. Solutions are being created based on those four theories of poverty. More pathology, so just more programs, nonprofit programs. Scriptural, go to the churches and you have this huge movement of Christian nationalism that upholds this narrative. And there's a lot in these large churches that are saying these things that we're seeing coming out of today, they're not true. Like there are a lot of people in this country that believe that the Epstein files aren't true. They're controlling the narrative because they're controlling the message. So how do we react to this? What do? We look to our theory of change. If we can have a correct analysis of the problem, that's why we study this, y'all. We don't study this for academic reasons. We don't study this to go to dinners and impress our friends. We study it to solve it. We're studying it to win. We're studying it to live. We're studying it to be free. So with our analysis, if it can be correct about what's going on, we can create a strategy to solve it. And that's our theory of change. Any solution based on an incorrect analysis is doomed to fail. We continue to study together. We continue to look at this. So we live in a world where we need to work to secure all basic necessities of life. Housing, more homes than people who need them. People are dying outside of empty buildings. Becca just texted me and said, in Elmira, New York, and this is true across the country, they just shut down a huge building and displaced hundreds of people who are now on the streets. So more empty houses than people and more empty buildings than people who need them. We throw away in this country more food than we need to feed this country and the world. We have some of the best, at least we used to. I'd have to look up to see if this is still true. Have some of the best healthcare technology because I didn't travel much as a younger person, and I've started to have the ability to go see how other countries are surviving. So this may not be true, but some of the best healthcare technology, I've had the honor to see some really great healthcare technology in other countries. But we have one of the worst provisions. We're cutting Medicaid. Right? We're cutting food stamps. We're cutting all of these things. Transportation, education, water. Our water systems are being destroyed. Our utilities are being cut off. Our grid, they're saying our grid is going to go down. Clothing, all the things that we need to live and survive, right? We have to earn. Like our analysis is that is a system that cannot continue. It is a system that kills. We have to kill it before it kills us, right? How do we solve it? What's the solution? The solution is to build a broad-based movement against the system that creates poverty, homelessness, and hunger, starting with organizing those with the least interest, as Terrell was saying, those who have no interest in the current system. They have nothing to lose but their chains. But the coming right out of the National Union of Homeless, freedom isn't free, y'all. You only get what you're organized to take. So we have to organize power across all lines of division, because that's another theory. That's another strategy. Excuse me, use the wrong word. That's another strategy, is highlight divisions so that we won't talk to each other and we won't organize. We have to organize across all lines of division: geography, identity, what they say is class. We have to organize across all these lines to come to one movement to end the system that creates poverty, hunger, and homelessness. So we can go to, I want to give some visuals. Some of the next slides have to do with AI. So I just want to really drive that piece home. We can go to the next one. 300 million jobs. If you're in a society where you have to earn your food and your housing and your health care, and the class that owns and controls is okay with 300 million jobs being lost, that's a system I can't live with, y'all. 300 million jobs. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is the number of jobs impacted by AI. So it started out small with ATM machines. It started out small with self-checkouts. It's much bigger now, y'all. Much, much, much bigger.